If we're not already connected, I want you to go out to my social media platforms or subscribe to this channel as we continue guiding your organization towards fractional workers. And what does that look like in your organization? Now, Deloitte has said that 50% of the workforce will be fractional work. It doesn't necessarily mean that 50% of your operation will be fractional workers, but you should be taking steps in 2025 on where you could incorporate a fractional worker, not only just to meet top talent where they're at and where this modern workforce is shifting, but also just for burnout prevention, because it sounds like this overload is not going to stop. So what things can you strip away so we can start separating tactical and strategic, where those high cyclical seasons that we have in our operation can get some aid so we're not drowning and trying to recover after. So there's all different benefits to fractional work. Go ahead and check out the other episodes in this playlist as you guide your organization through this change. This episode is focused on measuring the success and ROI of a fractional worker. And why this is going to be important is there's other variables in play that come in during fractional work that can make it unsuccessful or even make that worker look bad. For example, I will go into something like fractional work for HR, and I would be on a strategic level. So say we do a complete talent plan refresh. We're going to be talking about how do we create engaged teams and agile teams, which means we're going to recruit different. It means that we're going to maybe move a few people around so that we have a balanced team and we're not just focused on skill sets. The only way that's successful, though, is if that plan rolls out, if everyone's on board and doing their parts of the new program. So do you see where the ROI and the metrics that might be set for a fractional worker could be set up for failure, even though they didn't have control of that situation? Since fractional work is minimal hours compared to full-time work, you want to make sure that not only fractional work is being applied in your operation, but it's being integrated into your operation so everyone's on board. Go check out some of the change management tools that are in my YouTube channel that will help guide your teams through change. So a great way to start with ROI in a fractional worker is, what is the scope of the project in their control, and what is that timeline and milestones within that? So I suggest for a lot of fractional roles is to have a Gantt chart. So that's used often in project management, in which they have a long timeline project. And then there's certain timelines, some milestones that have to be hit in order to hit this mark, this deadline, this budget, this install, whatever it may be. So in fractional work, say over the next year, you hire Kelly Bubolz for an HR fractional worker to refresh your talent planning and make agile teams. Okay, so this is 2025. I need to establish some milestones with you that I want to hit with your team to get me here by the end of the year. And that might be even guiding like recruitment personnel, talent acquisition type of roles, or actually onboarding people, whatever it may look like. So KPIs with that might mean the milestones, so that you know as this timeline goes that I'm hitting the mark, hitting how many people I should have interviewed, hitting how many teammates we had to start the movement or internal promotions, all different things. What is going to be the KPI for this role? And it has to be very specific to why you hired them. I want to clear the air there that sometimes we hire a fractional worker for this, and then you find out their skill set because they're going to be very good, and you put them in all different things over here. You hired them for this. So this is where the KPIs are, and this is where the ROI is, because you hired them for this. So certainly they can take on all things outside of the scope of that project, but the ROI and the success of the fractional worker should be on the main outcome that you hired them for. Tracking the productivity and the outcomes then should be also defined. And we're talking about SMART goals. So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timed. Are these clear? We hired Kelly for this outcome. Do we have specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and timed, which mean deadlines, marks throughout this process that she needs to hit, and that will give you the ROI on it. And now there's different areas that you can gather data and feedback. It could be across teams. It could be just in those timeline marks. Are we hitting things? Are we saving on production and quality? Are we saving on time? That's a great one to measure, because say if you have a system integration and now people don't have to manually put things down, are we measuring that at the front end of the project? Because then let's measure it at the end of the project, because if the system integration did what it said it was going to do, you should have saved time. Time times the hourly wages of people's work hours, and there's your ROI right now. And then can you adjust strategies as this rolls out? So that's why I said the milestones. So say you hired me for this, but then also during this you had a growth phase in your business and a huge client come on board, and you need to shift this whole talent plan because now the things you thought you were going to hire for aren't going to be your primary anymore. So I'm cruising along in this timeline as your fractional worker. Do we have some marks to adapt? So say I get halfway through the year and you want a whole different type of workforce because you have this big client coming on. Can we adjust this strategy and not go too far off path and get a new result? And again, this is why it needs to be kind of in the milestones, the little bite-sized goals within that, so that you can adapt and reroute and shift as needed. Measuring the success and ROI of your fractional worker can be difficult if the scope is not clearly defined, if the scope continues to change as you onboard them and they get distracted or pulled into other things that they shouldn't have been in, which again, they can do, but what are you going to measure them on? And that's why we need those adaptive milestones or bite-sized goals so that you can reroute during those situations. A great calculator you can use as well is out on my website, and it's actually called the De-Energized Workforce Calculator. But when you're talking about saving your workforce time, when you're talking about productivity and turnover and cost of hire, it's more than you think. And I put in the general research statistics, and then I went through this with clients, and it actually was more than the statistics were saying. So we took a customer service department, and this department was very manual and getting disengaged. They hired me for some other things, and we got rerouted into this customer service department. And they had dysfunctional meetings. They weren't all on the same page, like scattered around the woods doing their own thing. They weren't getting really good information from sales, so there was a lot of backtracking and research back to sales in order to just do their job. And that sounds like a mess, but it's actually pretty familiar in most operations. So dysfunctional meetings, we calculated one meeting. It was 1.5 hour meeting, and there was over $4,000 of expense or costs to that meeting because it wasn't productive. They didn't actually have any outcomes or action items out of that meeting. It ran over, there was spillover. So one meeting for this group, over $4,000 a month. And again, that's 1.5 hour meeting, which is crazy because you have a lot of meetings throughout the week. Turnover, so they were having a lot of turnover and people leaving. We calculated that around $13,000 per customer service employee. The cost of hire for this customer service employee, because it wasn't like a call center customer service, it was a little bit more technical, but still could be trained within, I would say, 90 days, they said. Cost of hire was $25,000 per customer service employee. And then the disengagement cost, which is, again, I had to rely a lot on research in this calculator, but the 10 employees that are disengaged and why they hired me, that cost was almost $40,000. So this is a great metric when you bring in a fractional worker to help or aid in something, to utilize this metric or this calculator to calculate as the milestones continue to see where are we at the beginning of this project and where are we at the end. Now, this is a customer service department, so I don't serve that, but say I was a systems integrator, and a big issue that this customer service department was having is the information flow in it. They're only using 10% of the system, and the system actually has a lot of like automation features and notification features between these 10 employees, so they don't need to walk over here and then like chit chat forever and then walk over here to sales to get more information. There's a lot of automation features that could be turned on. So say you hire a system integration software engineer on a fractional basis to work on this customer service system or this CRM or whatever's in your operation. Dysfunctional meetings still has to be addressed, but they should be fairly clean going forward because all that information flows in the system. You just have to refocus to agendas and time slots on your meetings. And so that cost should go down. turnover and cost of hire, because they aren't working in a dysfunctional system and doing everything so manual, should go down. And then disengagement, because they're going with the change instead of fighting and battling the change. Disengagement should go down. So that would be a good ROI. And then, of course, calculate the amount of work hours saved because of all the automation and integration in between systems. That calculator is available on my website to go grab up, and then there's also a consult with it so that we can discuss how can you measure metrics, what does fractional success look like in your project, and how can you go about creating bite-sized milestones along the way so that you can adapt and reroute as your operation grows, changes, and evolves. Change does not have to be scary. Fractional work does not have to be scary. We take the little steps to gain information, make a plan, and lead the change.